This afternoon, I will talk about words. Words may connect, but words may also disconnect. I'll show you two perspectives. The first one is dialogism, and the second one is identity politics. And I will tell you how I think that these two perspectives, together with language, may have an impact on global issues, such as democracy, education, and security. But let me begin by telling a story from my childhood. Are you a Christian? That was a question that most people during the 70s in Sweden felt uncomfortable to answer. My grandfather was at that time a bishop, and his analysis was that people didn't want to be put in compartments with a label on it. The people who approached him, and many people did, I remember when I was at his home, drunk men would phone him on his home telephone. They asked for hope. Or a teenager, they asked him, how do you break up in a decent way? These people didn't want to call themselves Christian. Instead, they said that they were deeply interested in religion or Christianity, but Christian, they refrained from that label. Labels. These labels fascinate me. Would you say that labels are equal to identity? Please keep this in mind during my talk. In my research, I have studied loaded words. And I have not worked with the domain of religion, as did my grandfather, but instead I have looked into three other domains: health, gender, and ethnicity. And for each of these domains, I have performed a case study. The first one concerns person med intellektuell funktionsnedsättning, or translated into English, person with intellectual impairment. And the second one is HBT, or HBTQ, which means LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. And the third one concerns the transition from zigenare to Rom, from Gypsy to Roma people. All these changes took place in Sweden during the time from 1990 to 2010. And they all concern minorities and how official administrations at national level or municipal level address these minorities. So I'm interested in official language, but I think that this might also have bearings on a personal plane, how other people address you and talk about you. And it has been said before, and I'd like to say it again, that people, when we're talking about words for people are always more loaded than words for example, floor or ceiling. What I have studied are language planning actions. So this means that they all stemmed from a conscious act to change words, to change expressions. And while two of these actions were successful, the third one, a person with intellectual impairment, had many more difficulties in sticking into the official language. According to my results, the main reason was that this expression was not initiated by the group itself. The members of that group were not happy with the label or the expression, and they didn't want to use it either. I will return to this group at the end of my talk. Let's take a look at one of the more successful language planning actions, Roma. Roma comes from Romani Chib, which is the language that the Roma people speak. It means human being. And this was initiated and launched by the Roma group itself. Why is it important to say Roma instead of Gypsy? Let me take help from one of my fellow colleagues, Deborah Cameron. She says, if I introduce myself as Deborah, I will not be happy if people call me Jane. So this is a strong argument, I think, that goes for many minorities in the world. It is about the right to choose one's own name, one's own expression, label if you want. Let's now move over to the first of the two perspectives, dialogism. About 100 years ago in Russia, there lived a pedagogue. His name was Michael Bakhtin. According to him, we need to show each other mutual respect if we are to create new knowledge and if we want to form a good learning environment. Today we are here at Stockholm University, but also outside these walls, also outside similar institutions, we need new knowledge in order to cope with the challenges of our time. According to Bakhtin, the aim is not consensus. Instead, it is very important that various voices can be heard, and that one really takes the perspective of another person. And in order to do this, and in order to earn this respect, I think it's a good beginning to use the right expression, to use Roma and not Gypsy. And the next perspective, identity politics. I'd like to present an analysis for you today that was made by Kenan Malik. He's a British commentator on politics. And according to him, the politics of assimilation was abandoned in Greater London in early 1980s. And the background was that Greater London suffered from huge problems at that time. Problems with racism. Skinheads went out in the streets and beat other people who had a different skin color than themselves. Trying to solve this situation, Greater London, the municipal level, suggested multiculturalism, and it was implemented by the administration. And as you may know, in a multicultural society, groups and members of groups are encouraged to cultivate their own specific identity, which may be distinguished from other people. In this process, great amounts of money was transferred from the municipal level of Greater London to NGOs, non-governmental organizations, in order for these NGOs to attract people, inhabitants of London, and so to speak, regroup the area. And these NGOs offered various identities to attract people, and one of the identities that was offered was the identity of Muslim. Before, according to Malik, the religious identity had not been primary for the people of Greater London. They had looked upon themselves, those who had migrated there decades ago, maybe as black or Pakistanis or Indians. But thanks to this regrouping action, Malik means that polarization took place. And he also means that racism was redefined in this turn. Before it had meant the denial of equal rights, but now it moved towards the denial of being different. And Malik also claims that before people had worked together towards common political issues, such as to develop the democracy, to work for better welfare, better education. But now these goals were somewhat set aside and hidden or forgotten. And this happened first in Greater London, and then, Malik means, it spread to a global setting, much thanks to the Rushdie affair, which took place a few years later on in the 80s. And on a global scene, important issues such as food for everyone, clean water, and democratic rights like the freedom of election, the freedom of speech, they were now set aside, and identity politics instead emphasized differences and led to fragmentation. And according to Malik's analysis, consequences of identity politics are now what we see, the conflicts that we have seen the last month in Paris and in Beirut. Okay, words, language. What does this all have to do with language? I would say a great deal. In this, of course, very well anchored demand and requirement to be called by a name, to have the right to choose one's own name or expression, it may also be acknowledged that that group can cultivate its own identity and values, and maybe in this process move away from common issues in a democracy. It doesn't need to be the case, of course, but as a researcher working with loaded words and with words for minority, I see this danger rather clearly. I have myself been part of debates where people have told me, you're not part of our group, you don't share our experiences, you don't have the right to say anything on this matter. I'd like to take this opportunity to stress that with such a claim, you deny one of the most fundamental qualities of language, namely the ability to take another perspective. Language has techniques for this, for example, modality. So language can connect, but language can also disconnect. And of course, this goes directly against the aim of dialogism, the aim of mutual respect. It's time to wrap up. I have tried to show during my talk that to use the correct name, or the label if you want to, for minorities, it's both necessary, but it might lead to dangerous consequences, enhance identity politics, emphasize differences, instead of working towards common goals. My question now is it possible to adopt a dialogical perspective without falling into the trap of polarization? I really hope so. I really do. And the next question, are labels equal to identity? Maybe there is a fear in too close connections. The people approaching my grandfather might have thought it was too close a connection to call themselves Christians, to put that label on their identity. Let me end by quoting one of my informants. It's a young man who has himself intellectual impairment. I presented to him various expressions that had been put on his group lately. And I said, what do you think about these? He said, why do we need labels? We are all human. Thank you very much.